Morning. Welcome back to another episode of CivicList. I'm Matthew Camp, and I'm joined by Mayoral candidate Kathryn Garcia. Good morning, Kathryn. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Wish it was warmer, but
Yep. So today's April 1st. That's the day we're recording, and it's typically the day that the state passes its budget. And I always thought that was funny because it's April Fool's Day. Maybe they should change it.
most importantly, it is my niece's birthday today.
Oh, amazing! Happy birthday to your niece. And so I guess my first question is just related to that special day. As a two-parter in terms of the state's passing its budget. Obviously, one of the biggest issues right now is budget shortfalls. So how are you thinking about how, as perhaps mayor, you would address a big budget shortfall? And then the second part of the question has to do with city and state dynamics, but we could get to that.
I think everyone is looking forward to seeing what is in this budget and how New York City does and whether or not we are getting our fair share. And the biggest buckets are always education funding and what the Medicaid reimbursement looks like. And we know that the city needs funding in order to do what we have to do to ensure that we are dealing with the pandemic aggressively and ensuring that people get vaccinated, but also returning kids to school, making sure the streets stay clean, making sure that people feel safe on the subway. All of these things need to happen. And so advocating for ensuring that we're getting our fair share is terribly important. The other piece of this is just how do you manage the budget? And I really take the view of what exactly do we need? And that you go from there. It's almost like baseline budgeting, like how you would start in your own home,
Mm,
so that we are ensuring that we are being efficient as we move forward.
yeah. So how do you figure out what we need? And in terms of the big picture, obviously there's looking over documentation, but more also on the personal level, what are you hearing from people in terms of what they need?
So on the personal level, what I've been hearing from people is really that they need those city services that are local services everywhere. They really need to see their kids get back in school and ensuring that we have enough teachers to make that happen. That they're very worried about the educational loss and the socio-emotional challenges that kids are facing. And I think sometimes their own socio-emotional challenges of having been a teacher for a lot of this year. Um, and knowing that they're going to need more support beyond what is we are accustomed to in school, uh, that they do want to make sure that they're very worried about crime rising and the increase in shootings and the anti-Asian hate crime. And it's the feeling of randomness around that is deeply concerning to many members of the public that I'm talking to. And actually, as am I, concerned that we're seeing a spike in crime. Uh, and they really want, I mean, it's not totally, but that they really want to feel some more normalcy.
Mhm.
They want to be around people. They know that it's not quite safe enough yet, but they really want to be with their family, with their friends, as we go forward.
Mhm. So many different concerns about safety, whether it's just the walking on the street and breathing the air to perhaps getting attacked. And so how do you reconcile that need for to lower crime, but also the calls for rethinking policing and adjusting police budgets?
So I believe that public safety is a broad term. We do need to have police visible on the street. But if you even think about reopening restaurants and having eyes on the street because there's more activity, that actually does make us safer.
Hmm.
Uh, and so having that sort of compact that we have as New Yorkers about watching out for one another is incredibly important. So we need both to have a police force that's effective. And I've said that we can walk and chew gum, that we can have reform, as well as have police officers who are going to respond to shootings, who are going to respond to assaults, but that we also know that we need other things to make it so that we lower crime, that we need to make sure that we are very intentional with our young people about them envisioning careers for themselves and us envisioning careers for them and making that happen.
How do you make that happen?
There are some really fascinating opportunities out there that we just haven't leveraged, whether or not that's early college, where you're graduating from high school with the 2 years of college credits, which means you're 50% paid for by the time you're done, to 529 plans for all children that's being done in District 30 in Queens, to braided learning, where you are in the workforce while you're in high school, but also thinking about our trade schools and ensuring that those kids come out and can get a job, either in the public sector or in the private building trades world. There are a lot of opportunities to make it so that young people see their future, that they're not just trying to, check all the boxes to get a high school degree, but they really are trying to use that for something where they're looking forward to the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important for young people to have something to aspire to. And I was talking with my nephew, whose name is James, and he's 16 years old, asking him for advice because this was over the summer and the fall when things were very tense nationally, politically, and they still are. But I wanted to know, how does a young person think about how to bring people together, how to span divides, whether it's generationally, politically, et cetera. And he said, food is the way to bring people together. So I guess that's a two-part question. What are you hearing from young people in terms of their ideas? And also what's the role of food? Because I know obviously you were the food czar in distributing food for the city of New York during the pandemic.
Yes, no, food is incredibly important. It's also how we mark our lives. I've decided I didn't get a year older in the pandemic because I didn't have the birthday and the cake and the party with people. We did it on Zoom, but it just doesn't seem to count in the same way. And how we join together and celebrate and learn about each other. There was someone who I'd met recently who is originally from the South and had never had pad thai. I was like, how is that possible? Just as a New Yorker, I'm so accustomed to engaging with different ethnic groups through food. You get invited to someone's house and they are going to serve you what is important to them and what comes from their family. And that is them sharing a part of who they are with you. And it is, there, if you talk about distributing food, it's, some groups are like, if there's not meat that is halal is not vegetarian. Halal means we need to have halal meat in it. Or, in other communities where we are all vegetarian and we only have plant-based food. Lentils was really a challenge there at the beginning. So important for many communities in what they are going to put on the table. But I believe that, there are so many different opportunities for New Yorkers to come together. So it is around food. I feel like that is where it's at the dinner table, it's at the party, it's in a restaurant, marking all of our events. And we're very judgy about food. New Yorkers are food snobs, all of them. All 8.6 or 4, wherever we are right now, are all food snobs. And they all have the best neighborhood restaurants.
Right. A lot of good options. Yeah.
But they don't believe your neighborhood has the best restaurants. They believe their neighborhood has the best restaurants, which was all good with me. I was like, I'm happy to come visit you and, grab empanadas or grab, a slice of pizza. Those are all things that I'm like, oh, I can do a whole tour of the city this way. Not great for my waistline, but it makes me very happy. Um, but it's also being able to have communal spaces. To be able, what I think about is one of the things that saved us during COVID was our parks,
Mm,
and being able to be social with people uh, in a space that was safe, in a space where you could actually breathe and not worry that you were
mm,
gonna be infected. Um, and so it was our living room, it was our office, it was our yoga studio. Um, I found that to be where I saw real community coming together. But I just say, to go back to food, community stepped up over and over again to volunteer at food pantries, to do distributions. Um, I think that that has been one of the shining stars of humanity in what has been a very dark year.
mm, mm. Yeah, the parks have definitely been my lifeline during this past year. And I want to get to parks and environmental concerns, given your extensive background. But just to kind of close the loop on the youth question, in terms of the youth voices that you're hearing, like their concerns, I'm curious about.
Oh, so they're concerned, from the folks that I'm talking to, both about, their education and I'm graduating into an economy. How is one going to get a job?
Yeah.
But they actually also have a much longer term view. Like,
Mhm,
they are the most passionate about environmental issues.
mhm.
They are the most concerned about climate change, and the most willing to sort of say, we need to be radical.
Yeah.
Um, we need to really be taking steps to um, change our environment.
So what kind of steps are you here? I love that. I love that they're forward thinking, because a lot of times politicians get blamed for not being forward thinking enough, or business people um, thinking only about the next quarter. So if the young folks are thinking many steps ahead, what are some of the environmental ideas that you would like to see happen if you're mayor?
Right. I mean, I'll tell you that climate almost never polls well. That is why politicians probably don't pay attention to it, except that it's here. Uh, and the impacts are being seen across the country already. Like last year, California burned. Recently, Texas froze, which was pretty astonishing.
Hmm.
So the impacts are already here. And so I have been very firm about, we really need to look at decarbonizing our entire economy. The largest piece of greenhouse gases from the city of New York is actually heat and hot water. And getting conversions to uh, high efficiency heat pumps will make an astonishing difference. But we also need to ditch dirty diesel. The worst air quality is around our highways.
Hmm.
And think about it. We have school buses that carry our youngest children, and they are some of the most polluting vehicles. And so I have said I would electrify those. But in order to do that, we need more electric power, and we obviously need more clean electric power. Uh, so that means ensuring that we are getting the transmission lines from upstate to bring down that solar, that we are supporting offshore wind, that we are turning Rikers into a renewable Rikers, and ensuring that we have the batteries so that when the sun doesn't
Yeah.
shine and the wind doesn't blow, we still can take care of each other.
Yeah.
Um, so I really view this as all encompassing, but it also gives us such benefits now. A greener New York City cleans our air now. If you have more trees, it cools our streets now, and sort of mitigates what is called the urban heat island effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, all those sound like really great ideas to implement, and you should come visit. My co-op complex was is a model for a prototype for a lot of different things. It's a prototype for Mitchell Llama. We were the first to pilot the composting program under Bloomberg. We're a model for efficiency in 1950s standards. So we, got a D, in our environmental ranking. So we're doing a little bit of surveying to figure out how to make that better. yeah, I'm sure, we're pretty middle of the road in terms of efficiency, which is not good, in terms of how a co-op or another building and could do better. Um, I was talking with a friend yesterday about Joe Biden's new plan for infrastructure and a greener economy, and I I was wondering if, in the regulations there might be an opportunity if, there's always city and state regs and I guess federal um, environmental impact statement you have to make if there's a new regulation getting rolled out. Can can there be a carbon neutral statement or a carbon negative statement requirement or something like that in regs or
Certainly, you can pass local legislation. And we have passed some really far-reaching climate legislation already, like Local Law
yeah,
97.
yeah,
Uh, and is going to require and incentivizes folks to start to make those investments that will make your co-op not a D,
right,
that it
right.
can help make it, you know, ensure that it is meeting the environmental goals.
Mm. Is ask is including a carbon neutral or negative statement in every regulation, is that too radical or is that something that
Yeah,
we're
I
getting
think it
towards?
has to be something we are really pushing for,
Yeah,
because we got to bend the curve.
yeah.
We've got to bring the curve and really drive it down.
Hmm. So I was thinking just to shift topics a little bit, but sticking on the same that same policy idea. Ibram Kendi talks about racism in terms of policies, racist policies, and I was thinking, can there be some kind of requirement or regulation, for every new policy that's issued that just like an environmental impact statement, it needs to have like an anti-racist statement. How is this policy uh, racism neutral or racist anti-racist? Right? Is that something that we can think about?
I've never thought of that. I like, it might be because in many cases I was thinking about projects that were more broadly impactful to the whole city. Because in
Yeah.
many of my roles, it's like, oh, we need to put a new water tunnel in. Well, that's going to serve the whole city. Uh,
But then there's environmental justice issues where does the water tunnel go? Where does the pipeline go? Where does the waste transfer station go? In which community?
yes, and so I've done a lot of work on waste equity to ensure that we don't have transfer stations in overburdened neighborhoods and cut those permits in those community boards to make it so that we did have more equity,
Yeah.
and finished and completed the solid waste management plan that moved the residential out of most of those communities and moved it on to trains, which
Mm,
are much cleaner and took like 60 million miles of long haul trucking off the road, uh,
wow.
getting that done.
Wow.
So, not an inexpensive solution,
Hmm.
but a much more equitable solution.
Hmm. Great. Um, so I'm wondering if you have any stories of any constituents, any people you've met. I just think it's so interesting, you know, to as a candidate, the last thing you want to do is shake hands and kiss babies. It's dangerous. So
Yeah,
are there stories of people you've met recently that you might want to share?
certainly. And so, I've been out somewhat, but not a lot, and usually in the open air, in order to ensure, as like the one thing this campaign cannot afford is to have a whole bunch of people get sick.
Yeah.
Uh, we cannot have that. But we've been out a little bit, so it is very difficult to connect with people on Zoom or for them to want to share a personal story on Zoom. But when you are sort of out and at rallies, I have really, when I have talked to folks, and a lot of this has been because I've been around parents. Uh, they will tell stories of their kid who's like a preteen, really beginning to look like they're suffering from depression, hasn't been in school in a year, misses their friends, misses the interaction. Um, and, that has been one of the things that I've been hearing, or that even if they're in school in hybrid, it gets closed so often and it's so hard to manage, uh, which I really, um, really feel for, because I, as a working mom, the idea that I couldn't depend on school on any given day, uh, I don't know how I would have managed. These parents have been absolute heroes to try and get this done.
Mhm, mhm. Do you have any ideas for improving the city's mental health?
I do believe that we need to make it so that there is easier access. But for kids in particular, there's going to have to be counselors at schools. There's going to have to be protocols where teachers and principals are having a conversation about every kid every week to make sure that we are catching if
Yeah.
there is trauma or if it's starting to manifest. Because who knows what this year has been like for many of these kids, whether or not they could have lost a parent or a guardian, or their parent has lost employment and now they are struggling with housing or food insecurity. But in addition, I think we need to make sure that we are engaging children through other means, whether or not that's art or music or sports, that we're giving them outlets, or theater. I think is a real opportunity as well, that they can be creative and be able to be expressive, as we begin to think about what does school look like post pandemic. But we all know that we've been suffering, and I think you've seen reports from psychologists and uh, uh, social workers that they're overbooked.
Yeah.
People actually are reaching out, which in some ways is good. We may have broken the stigma a little bit, uh, to make sure that people are like, oh, it's okay to say this has been really hard,
Mm,
um, and ensuring that people are getting that therapy.
mm,
But then also for some of our folks, or particularly for um, our mentally ill street homeless population, we need to make sure that they are getting into housing that has supportive services,
mm,
so that they get what they need, but they also need a place to live,
yeah.
because we know housing heals. Housing for homeless families means you're healthier. It means you're more likely to get an education. It means you're more likely to be able to hold a job.
Mm, mhm. And housing seems to be the number one issue across the board for all New Yorkers. And is there anything else on housing that you'd want to share?
Oh, I mean, it is foundational for humans.
Mm,
It's like you need water, you need food, you need shelter. Uh, and it is the thing that I think we need to be really focused on coming out of the pandemic. And so it is about building more affordable housing that's deeply affordable. It is about looking at what we can do to convert if some of these hotels or office buildings don't come back. So
mm,
they're not just empty, stranded assets. Um, and it is about looking at what are we paying in terms of the voucher for families in homeless shelters, uh, because it doesn't meet the market and it means they linger when we could actually fix that. And then we're going to have to fundamentally ensure that we are investing in NYCHA. Uh, you know, it is the decision to not do radical renovations there is a decision to condemn those buildings. And we have been watching that sort of slow speed car crash for probably 10 years now. It is time to actually get in and get it done. And there are some buildings that have been completed in those renovations that look amazing. Butansis, Baychester, Murphy, Ocean Bay, um, where those families now have a new bathroom, have a new kitchen, have an elevator that works, want their families to come over for Thanksgiving. It really gives them a dignity.
mm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, that kind of brings everything together nicely, and we talked about earlier, in terms of food and bringing people together. So we covered a lot, Catherine, in terms of safety, education, health, and housing, environment. And is there anything else on your agenda, that you'd want to share with people we haven't touched on so far?
One of the things we rolled out this week was our healthcare policy, which includes a lot of what we talked about. But there is another piece that I think is important to highlight over and over again, and that is maternal morbidity. We need to
Mm,
make sure we are saving our moms and ensuring that they have access to programs we know work from the data across the world, which is midwives for the medical portion of it, and then doulas to support women during labor. Uh, and that is creating a medical relationship. So it's not just during birth, but it's postpartum. It's as you're thinking about raising that child. Uh, I think that there are problems in the city that actually there are solutions we could be implementing now.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are definitely some policy citywide level services and solutions to implement. And I wonder, this is a question I always like to ask of everybody is, we've covered some big themes, but I wonder if there's any small scale action that a person could take today to make their lives, to make the life of the city healthier and better.
Well, the first thing everyone can is like, make sure that you don't litter.
Yep,
Pick up a piece of garbage.
yep,
Unfortunately, you will find one.
yep,
Use your reusables. Make
yep,
sure you've got your reusable bag and your reusable water bottle.
yep,
Uh, think about what you buy and how you travel.
yep,
Those all impact the
yep,
environment.
yeah. Yeah, and the picking up garbage. I've just did one volunteer thing recently. I think Gail Brewer's office was involved with it, and they gave us the little picker upper device, and it got kind of addictive, to go out to pick up little pieces of garbage. And I joke that like people pay good money to go on a retreat and fly to Thailand and go to a monastery and sweep a dirt floor, and it's like, well, we could do that here in our own backyard.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does feel good in a lot of levels. It's satisfying, and obviously it's good for the city. In addition to those other, choices to make. So I think, with the combination of the individual decisions plus the framing of how the city makes life more livable and healthier, are some steps in the right direction. So, Catherine, I just want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to stop recording and really, really enjoyed the discussion today.
No, absolutely. It's great to be with you.
Thanks.